Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and welcome back to the Advent build of the Arma Hobby P-39. And as you might be thinking, you can see half a whole cup of tea sitting there. I've got another snack. It's another festive snack. It's another one that's available all year round, but somehow has become synonymous with Christmas time. And I've bought a novelty package of this. This is Scottish shortbread, and these are festive shaped Scottish. And the unboxing never ends here at the Genesis Towers, does it? Festive shaped Scottish shortbread, shaped like little trees. Scottish shortbread, well, shortbread in general, is one of my favourite things. Walkers are a well-known sort of good brand, but still supermarket, you know. Speyside, that is in Scotland, and they are decent. And when you smell them, they just smell of butter and sweetness. They're so great. They're all about the butter, which is why I like them. I think. Crumbly, crispy. Please don't dunk shortbread, it's a waste. Wonderful. Sort of buttery, vanilla-ish. Don't have to have vanilla in. Just consult the instructions. They don't seem to have vanilla in. They're basically butter and flour and sugar, but they're wonderful. Scottish shortbread is absolutely wonderful, and I'm going to level with you because I know we can trust each other around here. The reason I've bought this small novelty pack is to save me from myself, because I do love shortbread, but definitely a Christmas favourite here in the UK, at least of mine. But as you can see, they've gone to the trouble of making festive shaped biscuits. I don't know if it's the same anywhere else, but certainly here it's pretty much a thing. But if someone doesn't know what to buy you for Christmas, you know, members of the family or work, you know, when you get a gift from work, if it's not alcohol based, it's usually a box of biscuits or a tin of chocolates, isn't it? I wonder if that's really how shortbread's ended up being such a stalwart of Christmas. I'm not sure. And a nice bit of tea. The tea, incidentally, is from Miles. Miles based at Porlock down there, Devon way, and it's very good quality. This is Smuggler's Gold. It's very good quality tea. It's very, very nice, and it's not even that expensive. You just have to get it mail order. You can't buy it in a supermarket. Anyway, today's efforts. This was the fourth session on the model. So I started the build on Monday. Today is Friday, so the only day I haven't worked on this is Wednesday because I was out Wednesday. And yeah, here we are. I have a complete airframe, pretty much. Is that going to stay in place if I take that tape off? Pretty much. Complete-ish airframe. The big bits are on there anyway. The rudder is not fixed, it's just sitting. I showed you everything yesterday. I'd already done all the test fitting, I'd already prepped the wing. So today, initially, I glued the fuselage halves together, and then I sorted out the correction of the seams. It should be fairly obvious from that there wasn't much to do. I glued it together with super glue, as I said I would, and the super glue that came out of the seam when I pushed it together was just sanded off afterwards and has given me perfectly smooth seams all the way around. No gaps really, nothing to worry about. Then I fitted the wing. There is a minor gap at the front there, the right forward leading edge. That's my fault. I felt like it was a bit too tight at the front. The fuselage was a little bit wider than the gap in the wing, and I felt like it was a bit too much, so I trimmed a little bit away from the fuselage, the sort of wing root area, just to alleviate that a bit. and I trimmed a tad too much on that side, so that's all me. At the front, ended up being really quite tidy. Yes, I used some filler, but not very much. Not sure how obvious that is. I've used super glue and talc, so it isn't very visible, but there really isn't much in there at all. It was actually worse at the back. I did trim that weird shelf off the back edge here. It did leave a slight gap. Wasn't anything terrible, but this area wasn't really a problem. But here, the join along this edge, this side was fine. This side was a little bit, it didn't quite work and needed quite a lot of trimming and sanding to blend it in. And then I had to reinstate all the scribed detail on the bottom, and to help me with that, because I could see I was going to have to do it, it's always useful if you can see something is going to happen, you know, take action before it becomes necessary. I made a template of this curve on the panel line, and I made it so that the straight side, basically it's the same width as the panel, so when it's in place the straight side butts up against the other panel line. So I used that as a pattern both ways up to reinstate that curved panel underneath. If you need to have a scribing pattern rather than, I just freehanded it with the good old Alpha, using the pattern as a guide. If you need to use the pattern properly, then you just make a tape pattern like that. I made this by putting the tape on before I started sanding, marked through the panel line and cut with the scalpel along that panel line, so it's a perfect replica of this side. If you need a real scribing guide because you're going to use a pin vise or something like this, simply stick that to a piece of relatively thin, you know, 1/2 mil or a mil, probably a millimetre-ish plastic card, something that's stiff enough to work but not so stiff that you're not going to be able to put it into position. Stick that down, cut round it, you've got a solid template, and then you can use that as a scribing guide. Any sort of rivety looking stuff was put back in with my needle in the old X-Acto handle. So the tailplane was already prepared and ready to fit, but with the fuselage being fully glued in and completely solid, when I came to fit it, I found I did need to trim a little bit more up the front here to get everything to sit where I wanted it. And again, I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to see, but I did have to use filler around the bottom of this piece here, and there is a little bit of scribing still to do just there. Once I was happy with that, I fitted the rudder, the vertical fin, and that has just been glued in place with Mr. Cement S. And again, the work that I did to the fitting area has made that pretty good fit, and I'm not going to do anything with the resulting panel lines. I'm going to leave that as it is. Elevator is a one-piece assembly, and that has to be trapped in place before you fit the horizontal stabiliser to the fuselage, and I have glued it at a very slightly downwards deflected angle. I did look through a load of pictures, and a lot of them have a neutral elevator, but a few they are drooped down. And then lastly, I've fitted the 3D printed nose piece. The advantage with the 3D printed one over the plastic one is essentially just that the gun troughs and the little fairings over them are much more nicely rendered. It fits well, it isn't perfect, but sometimes we have to accept that things aren't perfect and just leave them as they are, and that is the case here. There's a slight gap this side along that angle join. I used Arma Hobby Ultra Glue. So the front part is held in with super glue. Then I've got Arma Hobby along here because there was a slight gap. So I put the ultra glue in and then wipe off the excess and leave it. And there's a slight step this side, but I am not going to get involved too much with trying to rectify that with filling and sanding, because it will destroy the detail that I've added by fitting this part, so it becomes superfluous. And that is what I've done today. Doesn't look all that much, but it took quite a long time. What's left to do on this structure? Well, clearly we have to look at the canopy, and to do that there's a couple of final details to add into the cockpit area, the radio, gun sight, and the little clear panel, obviously this door. I also need to carve off the scoops on the nose here. There's one each side. Because they're facing the wrong way, they should be facing rearward, not forward. I will put the flaps on these 3 apertures down here, and once that's done, the model will be pretty much ready for any sort of final titivation, masking up and ready to get paint on. And you may be forgiven for thinking that has been very, very fast, because I fully expect this to be ready to start painting after the end of the next decent modelling session I get on it. But I think I had a little tot up before I started filming this, and I think I've probably put something like 18 to 20 hours into this up to this point. So although it's only been 4 days, it's been a fairly intense 4 days, and because I've not been having to keep stopping to take photos or film anything, I have literally been getting on quite properly with it and not being too distracted with other things. Now Brian Messier did comment on yesterday's video that he felt this maybe wouldn't last until the 24th, and had I planned the build to actually last that long? The answer is no, of course I haven't. I very rarely plan things that well. I do expect the model to be finished before that. However, I am going back to work on Monday, albeit for limited hours initially, but I am going back to work. And it's always nice to have a little bit of wiggle room, isn't it? So if I'm finished well before the 24th, all that's going to happen is you won't see the final model until the 24th, I'm afraid. Obviously you do always have other things to be getting on with, so it's no bad thing for me if I'm finished a little bit early. So as an aside, the last thing I did today before I decided to clear up and actually film this little bit for you is I've been through the instructions and the parts in the box, and I've removed from the sprues. None of this has been tidied up and cleaned up properly yet, but they've all been initially trimmed. The rest of the parts that will be going into this model, and I think it's very easy to see looking at this the intrinsically basic nature of your average World War II single-engined fighter aircraft model kit in 1/48, because there's really not that much in that tray, is there? You can see there's a sprinkling of 3D printed things. These are the correction vents that Arma supply. They actually supply 4, which is nice because they're exceptionally finely printed, and it would be quite easy to break them, I think. The main gear doors are also supplied by Arma, and in fairness, I need to point out that the plastic parts I'm using here are actually from the initial release, so the one with the coral pink aircraft on the box, because I had made a small start on cutting a few parts away and things like that before I decided to do this one, so I thought I'll just use those plastic parts. And as a result, I am using the 3D printed main gear doors that came with that kit, and the reason they're in the kit is that the plastic parts are moulded incorrectly. They shouldn't be. Now I can't remember which way round it is. They either are mirror images of each other or are not, but whichever it is they're supposed to be, they're not. So that's why the 3D printed doors are included in that kit. If you go out and get this boxing, you won't get the 3D printed main gear doors in it because the plastic parts have now been corrected. So that's it for update 4, complete with Scottish shortbread, Christmas tree shapes, and a lovely cup of Miles Smuggler's Gold. I hope to get episode 5 to you by the end of the weekend. We'll see how I get on with that. In the meantime, I will thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. And with all of that said, it only remains for me to say, until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, Genesis out.